It was a gray morning when Emily arrived at the cemetery, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the roadside. The world around her seemed quiet, too quiet, except for the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of city life. She knelt by the marble grave, brushing away the fallen petals from the name carved there, Amelia Hartman. The letters were engraved deep, yet time had softened their shine. Emily placed the flowers gently, whispering, "You were the only one who ever believed in me." Her voice trembled, carried away by the cold wind. For 3 years, she had been coming here, every month without fail. No one knew why a poor woman in worn shoes and a faded coat visited the grave of a billionaire's wife. But to Emily, Amelia wasn't a name from society columns or charity galas. She was the woman who had once saved her life. Years ago, when Emily's newborn son was gravely ill, it was Amelia, a stranger then, who had paid for the surgery that saved him. She never asked for thanks, never told anyone, and before Emily could properly thank her, Amelia had passed away suddenly, leaving only her kindness behind. That morning, Emily didn't notice the black luxury car that pulled up near the cemetery gates. Nor did she hear the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel behind her. She was too lost in her memories, too busy whispering prayers of gratitude to the woman who had changed her fate. When she finally stood to leave, she froze, because standing a few feet away was a tall man in a dark coat, staring at her with eyes full of confusion and sorrow. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice deep but hesitant. "Did you know her?" Emily clutched her scarf nervously. "Not really," she murmured. "She helped me once. I just come here to say thank you." The man's gaze softened. "Most people don't even remember what she did for them," he said quietly. "You're different." He stepped closer, his face more visible now. Strong, weary, handsome in a way that carried years of grief. "I'm her husband," he added softly. "This is my wife's grave, too." Emily's breath caught. Her husband? She had read his name 1,000 times in newspapers. Daniel Hartman, CEO of Hartman Technologies, one of the richest men in the country. To see him here, standing beside her, was surreal. But what struck her most wasn't his wealth. It was the loneliness in his eyes. He looked like a man who had everything yet had lost the only thing that mattered. Daniel looked at the wildflowers she'd placed, simple, fresh, imperfect, and for the first time in years, he smiled faintly. "She would have loved these," he said. She hated roses, said they were too perfect to be real. His voice cracked slightly as he crouched beside the grave. "I've brought roses every time for 3 years," he whispered. "Maybe that's why it's always felt empty." Emily knelt beside him, unsure what to say. For a long moment, they just sat there in silence, two strangers bound by the same loss, the same love for a woman who had touched both their lives in completely different ways. The wind picked up again, scattering petals across the cold marble. Daniel watched as one landed near Emily's hand, then looked up at her. "You said she helped you once?" Emily nodded. "My son was dying. I couldn't afford the treatment. She found out, I still don't know how, and she paid everything. She told me not to tell anyone. She said, 'One day when you're strong enough, pass the kindness forward.'" Her eyes shimmered. "I've tried to do that ever since." Daniel's throat tightened. He had always known his wife was kind, but hearing this from a stranger made her seem alive again. "That sounds like her," he murmured. "She always believed love was something you gave away freely." For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel alone at his wife's grave. Emily, in her humble clothes and kind eyes, had unknowingly brought Amelia's spirit back into the world, not through wealth or legacy, but through simple gratitude. He turned to her and said quietly, "Thank you for remembering her when the world forgot." But neither of them realized that this chance meeting between a grieving billionaire and a poor woman with wildflowers was only the beginning. Because within days, Daniel would discover something that would change everything he thought he knew about his late wife, and about Emily herself. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. The image of the woman at the grave, her quiet grace, her trembling hands, the way she spoke of Amelia as if she were still alive, haunted him. Emily. That was the name she'd written when she'd left a small note by the flowers. For Amelia, the woman who saved my son. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. After Amelia's death, he had poured himself into work, burying his grief beneath meetings and numbers. But that morning, watching Emily kneel beside his wife's grave, something inside him had shifted. It wasn't just curiosity, it was recognition. A faint, inexplicable pull, as though Amelia herself had led this stranger into his path. The next day, Daniel asked his assistant to find out who Emily was. Within hours, he had her full name, Emily Carter, and a thin file containing her details. Single mother. Lives in a small apartment near the city's edge. Works part-time at a flower shop. No criminal record, no debts, no notable connections. Just an ordinary woman surviving quietly in a world that barely noticed her. Daniel closed the file and leaned back in his chair, his thoughts swirling. He didn't know what he was looking for. Maybe understanding, maybe forgiveness, maybe the missing piece that Amelia had taken with her when she died. That afternoon, he drove to the flower shop where she worked. The bell chimed softly when he entered, and there she was, arranging white lilies in a glass vase, her hands moving delicately, her face calm but tired. When she saw him, she froze. "Mr. Hartman?" she said, startled. Daniel gave a small smile. "Please, just Daniel. I wanted to thank you again. For visiting Amelia." Emily set down the flowers, unsure of what to say. "You don't need to thank me," she said quietly. "She was a good person. I owe her everything." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the scent of fresh blossoms. Then Daniel said softly, "May I ask something? You said she helped your son. Do you still have the hospital papers?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I kept everything," she said. "It reminds me that kindness is real." She walked into the back room and returned with an old envelope. Daniel took it carefully, opening it as if it were something sacred. Inside were faded bills, receipts, and a letter. His breath caught when he saw the handwriting. It was Amelia's. He unfolded it slowly. The note was short, but every word cut through him like light. "Emily, don't lose hope. The world can be cruel, but I believe goodness always finds its way back. When your son grows up, tell him he was loved, even by strangers." Daniel's hands shook. He had never seen this letter before. His wife had written it in her final months, when she was secretly volunteering at the hospital without telling him. He'd always wondered what she'd done with her afternoons, why she'd come home smelling faintly of antiseptic and lilies. Now he knew. She had spent that time saving lives quietly, without recognition, because that was who she was. Emily looked at him, her voice trembling. "She told me once that she believed in you. She said, 'My husband's heart is bigger than his company. He just forgot where he put it.'" Daniel let out a shaky breath, a sad smile curving his lips. "She always knew how to tell the truth gently," he whispered, "even when it hurt." They stood there, surrounded by the hum of the city outside, connected not by wealth or pity, but by the memory of a woman who had changed them both. And in that moment, Daniel realized that Amelia's kindness hadn't died with her. It had found its way back, through Emily, through her son, through the quiet ripple of one good deed passed forward. Before leaving, Daniel looked around the flower shop and said, "You know, these lilies, they were her favorite." Emily smiled faintly. "I know. That's why I bring them." He hesitated, then added softly, "Would you and your son join me for dinner tomorrow? Not as a favor, but as friends." "I think Amelia would have liked that." Emily blinked, stunned by his gentleness. Slowly she nodded. "I think she would too." As Daniel walked out into the setting sun, the first time in years, he felt something lift inside him. The weight of grief replaced by the quiet warmth of connection. Somewhere above, perhaps, Amelia smiled too,